going to get straight to that big interview. We are now joined by a very special guest. Tsai is here. He's Alibaba's co-founder, executive vice chairman, and he is the owner of the Brooklyn Nets. We are at Barclays Center this morning. Thank you for having us. This is your home, and thank you for the I don't know if everybody can see the shot to have Squawk there on the big screen. So we appreciate seeing you. And tonight's the big game.
It's the big game. Thanks, Andrew, for having me.
Thank you for having us. Let me start with this. We talked in September, I don't know if you remember, Delivering Alpha. We're talking about the economy, and we were talking about what the post-pandemic world would look like. This actually is the ultimate post-pandemic trade, if you will. And I'm curious, I mean, we're going to have 15,000 fans plus in here tonight, sort of how you see the economy coming back here in the United States, what you've seen in China, and sort of how you see this all playing out at this point.
Well, Andrew, I just came in from Hong Kong, where the economy is terrible. And that's because the government has been focused very much still on the spread of the virus, where here in the United States, everybody's been focused on vaccinations. If you're vaccinated, then you could live a normal life.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. So when I landed in New York, I was very surprised. I went to our home game, Game 2, we had a full house, right? We had an unvaccinated section with some social distancing, but by and large, it was a full house sellout crowd.
98% were vaccinated.
98% were vaccinated, and that's very, very encouraging. And based on that stat, what I'm seeing is the economy is definitely coming back. It's going to roar back. When you go out to restaurants, people are having a good time. So this is pretty much normal.
But you said in Hong Kong, not so much.
Not so much right now, but I think pretty soon the government is going to focus on vaccinations. Right now, only 10% of the population is vaccinated. In the case of China, they're trying to get 40% of the population vaccinated by the end of June. So that's going to be a good sign. Right.
What do you see else around the world in terms of, given the sort of span of the Alibaba business around the world, what you're seeing in Europe, what you're seeing in other places right now? By the way, even in Japan, they're having trouble with the vaccination. The Olympics is coming up.
Yeah, well, we are, 90+% of our business is in China. So that's very much coming back.
Right. And, in terms of the supply chains and whatnot?
In terms of supply chain, also in terms of consumption. So in the last fiscal year, we have 40+% year-on-year revenue growth. That's very encouraging. We're now up to over 800 million annual active consumers on our Chinese retail platform. But if you count Southeast Asia and also parts of Europe where we're active, we now have over 1 billion annual active consumers. Right. And we see that the various parts of the economy will largely come back at the end of the day, but it's all going to be dependent on vaccinations. The rate at which the population is vaccinated.
How worried are you about the U.S. economy overheating? There's a conversation we were talking with Paul Tudor Jones yesterday. Big questions about inflation, the Fed meeting over the next 2 days on this very issue. Where do you stand?
So I'm not an expert. I'm not an economist. But the way I see it is you're going to see some sort of short-term tick-up in the inflation rate. Obviously, the year-on-year comparison is an easy comparison with very robust numbers. But the real question is employment numbers. Our employment numbers are going to come back. Things don't get overheated unless there's a huge shortage of supply of labor with overriding demand and rising wages, right? So I think the Fed has been very clear on a very sort of benign policy. They even can tolerate some overshooting of the inflation rate before they pull back.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your role as the owner of this team, but also in the context of social justice, because this has become a town square, if you will, for social justice. And a lot of business leaders, I think, are grappling with this issue of their role in it. How have you thought about that?
So one thing that I realize when you own a sports team is it's larger than a sports team. It's a social institution. You're doing it for the fans. You're doing it for the broader population. I'm really glad we're situated in Brooklyn because we have the best fans in the world. And having this building, Barclays Center here, kind of fortuitously, we have this square or plaza in front of us with some empty space. So then this became a location for people to gather and focus on whatever social cause that they want to focus on. This building has been the site of for us to hand out food with food in cooperation with food banks.
Right.
It's been the site of vaccinations. It's been the site of voting. And obviously with the last year after the George Floyd incident, people protested for social justice against racism. And I think that's very, very important. And seeing all this happen organically in front of Barclays Center, that was great. I felt very, very good about it.
Did you ever think, I mean, you just bought this team now a couple of years ago. Did you ever think you would be involved in all of this?
No, I didn't. I guess 4 years ago, I didn't. I had no idea. But the NBA is very interesting. It's a very, I think it's a quite interesting sort of economic proposition in addition to all of this glitzy fanfare, right? When you look at the players, they're huge mega superstars. But the business side of things is just also quite attractive in that team values are rising every year. And but before I came into this, I had no idea that this was going to work the way it did.
I want to talk more about the economics of basketball in just a minute, but I want to ask you about this because you got involved in something called the Asian American Foundation, founding it effectively. It's really the first foundation focused on Asian Americans in the country in this way. And it comes, by the way, on the heels, we're talking about Black Lives Matter. How did you get involved in that, and what is it that you're trying to do?
So this happened more than a year ago, actually. I started to notice sort of rising anti-Asian sentiment because of COVID. Everybody thinks that COVID came from China, and therefore, as a Chinese person, I kind of felt it personally. And then you start to see a lot of crimes happening. So there was a period of time when every day you wake up, you see a new report of anti-Asian hate crime. So a group of us Asian Americans got together. We formed the Asian American Foundation. And what are the problems that we're trying to solve, right? If you look at the Asian American community in America, everybody's okay with Asian Americans as long as things are going well. If the economy is well, the Asian Americans play by the rules, prosper together with everybody else, that's fine. But if there's a crisis, if there's a pandemic, there's a war, or there's an economic downturn, Asian Americans get scapegoated. Right. And just look at history, right? Back in the 1800s, they banned Chinese immigrants coming into America. And during World War II, when America was at war with Japan, they actually interned, they put 120,000 American citizens that are of Japanese descent into concentration camps. And then you have, in the 80s, Vincent Chin. What happened was there was a economic downturn because Japanese cars were overtaking American cars. So there was a huge animosity against the Japanese in Detroit. Vincent Chin, who's Chinese, by the way, went to a bar, got beaten up. They killed him. They beat him to death by two auto workers in Detroit. And these two guys got off pretty much without any jail time. So there's a lot of that sort of undertone of anti-Asian sentiment. When things are good, that's fine. When things are bad for everyone, that's when those ugly shoots come out.
And you've partnered with people like Jerry Yang, who founded Yahoo, and so many others. Joe Bay, who's a KKR, to put this group together. I was shocked to see that the amount of philanthropy focused on Asian Americans is 0.05% in this country.
Right. And we were shocked to find that number. We had our team do a little bit of research, and then they came back and said, over the last 20, 30 years, if you look at the foundation money that's dedicated to Asian American causes, 0.5% or less. And so we said, well, if money is the issue, this is what we're going to focus on as the initial thing. So the credit to people like Jerry Yang, Joe Bay, Li Lu, Pen Zhao from Citadel Securities, Sheila Marcello, and all of our board members, as well as the Anti-Defamation League. We got Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL involved as a board member because they gave us huge amount of support on the issue of anti-hate. That's familiar territory for the ADL. And so thanks to the board, we step up with a commitment ourselves of $125 million. And then we went out and told the corporates, look, 0.5% is the number. What are you going to do about it? And to our surprise, everybody came in very enthusiastically. We had all the large corporate partners coming into this. By the time we launched, we had, I think you reported on it, it was like $250 million when we launched from corporates. Right now, we have raised over $1 billion. I think the number is $1.1 billion we have raised from the corporates and foundations. Not all of that money is going to come to us, come to the foundation. Most of that money will be spent on other Asian American organizations that are doing great work in anti-hate, in getting people to go out to vote, and in all the great work that they're doing.
So here's a hard question for you. I think it's a hard question. I don't know. How do you think about your role as a leader here in the United States on issues around Asian Americans, Black Lives Matter, voting rights, all of that, and whether and how you can speak out about, for example, human rights abuses in China? It's a hard one, I know.
You have to be specific on what human rights abuse you're talking about, because the China that I see, the large number of the population, I'm talking about 80–90% of the population, are very, very happy with the fact that their lives are improving every year. When I started at Alibaba in 1999, the GDP per capita was $800 in China. Today is over $10,000. And if you talk to a parent in China and you ask them, are your children going to have a better life than you are?
Right.
Most of them will say, absolutely yes. They're going to be educated. They're going to find good jobs. The economy is expanding, right? So I'd like you to be more specific on that.
Well, let me just ask it to you in this way, though. There are a lot of American business leaders today that are being pushed by their employees, by consumers, to say, look, we're taking a stand here on voting rights, for example, in the United States. You're also doing business in China. You should be consistent, right? Even Marco Rubio and others were actually criticizing American companies for what he was arguing was a hypocrisy. And when you talk to a lot of American business leaders, they say, look, I can speak out here, but I know that I'm not in a position to speak out there, because if I speak out there, it's not that my hand is going to get slapped, it's that my business is going to be damaged by the government because I'm just not allowed to do it.
Yeah, I think American company CEOs understand this very well, which is different cultures have different values and mores. And in China, you have different set of values. You also have a very different political system in that one single party dominates the governance of the country, which, whether you like it or not, there are some great benefits. Like China has managed to build a terrific infrastructure because there's no politicking around whether you should build a highway from point A to point B, right? So these are all the benefits. And the bottom line is you have to look at the results. Are people happy? When I look at China, the average citizen is very hopeful about the future. They're happy about where they are. And, I think that's really...
But you read the same headlines that I do about some of the human rights issues, no?
I live in Hong Kong, right? So everybody is worried. I still think it's kind of funny that people call me up, on these big Zoom calls and say, Joe, where are you? And I say, I'm in Hong Kong. And they say, oh, are you okay, right? Well, over the last year, they imposed the national security law. Hong Kong is one of the very few places that did not have a national security legislation in place. What is this for? It's against sedition. It's against people that advocate splitting up Hong Kong as a separate country. These are things that are not allowed. You know why? Because Hong Kong used to be a colony. A few hundred years ago, China lost Hong Kong to the Brits because of the Opium War. The British wanted to sell opium into China, and and as a result of some battles, China had to carve up Hong Kong and gave it up. This is a very scarring kind of history of China, having foreign powers come in and carve up your territories.
Right.
So if you put yourself in the Chinese people's mindset, if you're a Chinese citizen, I look at this history. I want to make sure that we prevent foreign powers from carving up our territories. I think Hong Kong ought to be seen in that context. I think there's a lot of criticism of, the democratic freedoms or freedoms of speech is being suppressed. But overall, since they instituted the national security law, everything is now stabilized. In 2019, when people were protesting on the streets, I was actually afraid to walk onto the street. You know why? Because I speak Mandarin. And they were targeting every person that spoke Mandarin because they would assume that you come from the mainland. Well, I actually grew up in Taiwan, where also, they speak Mandarin there. And so I actually felt physically threatened with these protesters, right? So I think now we have more stability. Hong Kong is going to be fine. You know why? Because it's free market economy. When you invest in Hong Kong, free flow of capital. You put money into the Hong Kong Stock Exchange today in Hong Kong dollars. Tomorrow you can take it out in U.S. dollars. There's a free flow of capital. It also has the most benign tax system there is for capital formation. The income tax rate is only 15%, and then there's no capital gains rate, no taxes on capital gains, dividends, and so if you want to invest in Hong Kong, great for capital formation.
I want to talk to you more about that in a second, but I know that Becky's got a question back in the studio. Becky?
Yeah, Joe, I just wonder, how's Jack Ma? You've been working with him for over 20 years, and after kind of seeing him on the global stage for such a long time, we haven't seen him in a long time. How's he doing, and what's happening with the rectifications of his businesses?
So I think you have to separate what's happening to Jack and what's happening to our business. I think our business is under some kind of restructuring on the financial side of things, and also in antitrust regulation, we had to pay a big fine, but we've gotten that behind us, so we're looking forward. In Jack's case, he's fine. He's lying low right now. I talk to him every day. I actually message him. We have our own messaging platform. He's actually doing very, very well. He's taken up painting as a hobby. It's actually pretty good. I can show you some photos later.
Well, let me just follow up on what Becky was asking, though, is there is either speculation or headlines that suggest that the Chinese government effectively has effectively taken his power away from him, that he's laying low because of the role of government, that the government has effectively taken his power in the context of Alibaba, in terms of what they've done with the Alipay IPO, in terms of what they've done even with the business school that he was putting together. Mm-hmm. Do you see that? Do you feel that? Does he feel that? Give us a little bit of color on how we should think about that and understand it.
Well, Jack is, since about 2 years ago, he stepped down as the CEO of the company. Also, he handed over the chairmanship of the company to Daniel Zhang, who's our current CEO. So for the last 2 years, he's pretty much out of the business. And I think the idea that Jack has this enormous amount of power, I think that's not quite right. He is just like you and me. He's a normal individual. He has built a tremendous, company of this scale. He's done great things for society. Right. He's done quite good things in the philanthropic area. Right. So, I think today he just wants to sort of say, hey, I want to focus on something. I want to focus on what I really want to spend time on, which is, all the hobbies, all the philanthropy. And that's where he is now.
But just to put a fine point on it, do you believe he's laying low willingly? Maybe that's the question.
Well, I think so. I think I don't think he's laying low, in the area of philanthropy. Right. I don't think he's laying low, with his friends and everything. You know, he's living a normal life.
Right.
After business, right?
Let me ask you a couple other questions about basketball because tonight is going to be a big game. James Harden is not going to be playing, unfortunately, but he's just joined the board of Saks. Did you see this?
I saw that. I kind of saw Instagram photos.
Do you advise him or any of the other players? I was going to say, Kevin Durant, so many of these players have become not just players but entrepreneurs in their own right. Do you guys have lots of conversations about venture capital and maybe investing money?
Yeah, so I don't think you should see players as these one-dimensional people, right? They happen to excel in basketball, but they also care about what they want to do, you know, outside of basketball or maybe post-career in the NBA. And I think it's pretty natural that they realize how much influence and power they have, and the fans that they they attract.
Right.
They can leverage that to market whatever they want, and I think it's great. By the way, I didn't advise James Harden on getting onto the board of Saks. He did it himself, and I think it's a great thing. I mean, look at this the fashion walk coming into the tunnel, right? We all these guys with all the NBA fashion now has become a thing,
right?
Something that my son, my kids, my two sons and my daughter, they follow all the time. They care about what these guys wear before the game.
Right. We got to run. Where are you going to be sitting tonight?
I'm going to be sitting somewhere across from the bench, probably on the floor. And
do you have a couple of seats? How does this work? Do you get to choose your seat at the game of, or the day of, or how does it work?
Well, I have to fight among my friends for seats because they all want seats. And sometimes I want to be nice and give them my seats, right? So it's always a fight.
What do you think is the best seat in the house, for real?
I think the
is
best
it center court on the court? There's some people who like to be, by the way, right behind the basket.
Yeah. You know what? I think the best seat in the house is where Steve Nash sits because he's got the whole game plan going. He's got formations and, where the player, who he wants the players.
Right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, I would just love to be in that seat and also sort of have his brain think through him.
Well, I'm rooting for the home team, so I wish you lots of luck tonight.
Thank you.
I assume Lasry will be here, too. You'll have to, right? Is Mark Lasry?
Mark Lasry will be here, yes. He's
you guys will not
great.
be sitting together, but maybe, I don't know, do the owners ever sit together?
Sometimes we do.
All right, not on a game like tonight.
Yeah.
Anyway, good luck. Thank you. Appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you.
Becky, back to you.